Clara likes to make purple omelets. Isabella takes 2 cubes in her tea. And Alexander saw a Cryonian tiger once. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 2, Imaginary Friend. Story by, get ready for this, Jean-Louise Matthias, John Wilkerson, and Richard Flegel. Teleplay by Edith Swenson and Brannon Braga. Directed by Gabrielle Beaumont. This was May 2nd, 1992. Where were you? And how are you today, Sirach Lofton?
I'm doing great. Episode 22. I think you said 2. I just wanted to correct that.
Oh, did I say that? Yeah, it's Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 22, but it was May 2nd. So it's 5-2,
Yeah.
5/22 on 5/2. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it's interesting because I wanted to ask you, this is now the second time that this has happened. And it's a small thing, but I'm sure that there's a reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when you mentioned the writers, the names of the writers are slightly different than I think the ones that I see credited on the episode.
Yeah, that's happened before. Which writer was it this time? I didn't check.
So you said Jean-Louis Matthias?
Yeah.
And I saw Ronald Wilkerson and Richard Flegel.
Yeah, I thought that's what I said.
Okay, so then that's right. Okay.
I might have said it wrong. I might be reading my own notes wrong. But yeah, Jean-Louise Matthias, Ronald Wilkerson, Richard Flegel, teleplay by Edith Swenson and Brannon Braga. Okay.
Braga. Okay.
So, we recognize one of those names out of 5.
I know.
There were 5 writers for this episode. So let's talk about this for a second. I remember this episode, and one of the things, now I've been a curmudgeon my whole life, even when I was a little kid. One of the things I never liked when I was a kid was caring about little kids. Once they hit into like teens, late teens, I was okay with that. But I never was interested in a 7-year-old's story or a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, it just never did it for me. Even when I was those ages. You know, if I'm watching Transformers and the Transformers story follows a 7-year-old boy I'm like, I don't care. I'm watching Transformers for the Transformers. I don't need a little human boy to identify with. I don't care. I want to see the Transformers. So I've always, even when I was that age and I was the target audience, I wanted to see Worf and Geordi and Riker. That's what I wanted to see. I did not want to see kids. And so when I do remember this episode.
Who invited Picard to the review?
It's true. I'm telling you, I've been kind of a curmudgeon my whole life, but I just didn't care about the kids. I'm like, when I'm watching Star Trek, I want to see adults doing adults things, And I don't want to see a 6-year-old. Doesn't do anything for me. So you can imagine what my take was when I first saw this episode back in the day. All I remember is this kid going, Isabella! And I'd be like, stop saying that. But that's my grumpy take that I've had for 30 years on this episode. Maybe I liked it a lot more this next time around. But you've never seen it before, Sirach Lofton. What did you think of it? Do you think these 5 writers came together to put, like, Voltron?
Like Voltron. Yeah, I wasn't blown away by it. If you have to say, yeah, can you imagine that? Yeah,
no,
I know.
I thought you would have loved this episode.
Absolutely, not really. It actually. Then they added Alexander Rashenko into it, and I was like, "Oh God, this is becoming an Alexander episode too."
I know, it morphed into Worf's son.
Yeah. And we just recently had a kid episode. Well, it was Worf's son, right?
Yeah, it was Alexander.
in Mangel's episode where
Right. The cost
she
of
bonded
living.
the cost of living, right? Which I actually enjoyed better than this one, as far as kid episodes, I guess is concerned.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Well, let me ask you this actually, because you were considered a kid actor, right? You started right
right,
around the age of 13, 14, right?
right.
When does it stop being a kid episode and then more of like a young adult kind of episode? Because I remember loving like the Jake and Nog stuff, especially when you guys were becoming roommates and stuff like that. I remember liking that. That didn't like trigger my child curmudgeon stuff. You know what I mean? Like it just felt like more like young adults because you guys talk like adults rather, like young people talking like adults rather than kids
Right.
talking like kids. And the Wesley stuff was a little rough around the edges for me, but I think it was mostly because of the writing. It wasn't because of the age. You know what I mean? So for me, I feel like it's like right around 13, 14, where it was palatable to me.
Yeah, I think it depends on how they write the characters and
Yeah.
also how familiar you are with them. Um, it's not easy on an adult show being the kid, so that's a challenge in itself. I can understand, Wesley Crusher and Will Wheaton having to, go to work with a bunch of adults every day and hold your own.
The bunch of people that are
So,
probably acting like how I'm acting right now.
well, yeah, they're probably like, "Oh God, I got to do this stuff with the kid,"
Right.
and so I understand that. I mean, it's just a natural thing, but it has to be something that, like, because I was watching, when you were saying when I was growing up, was I watching stuff with kids in it? I guess I was, but I wasn't necessarily like putting myself following the story of the kid as much as the story of what's happening, right?
Right.
And so I think what the story of what's happening has to be good enough for me to be interested. And I'm not going to just buy on because it's somebody who's my age, right? So I can remember, for example, big kid movies or movies with kids as stars. E.T. was huge for us when we were kids, right?
That worked on me. Yeah, E.T. worked on me for sure. Elliot. Right.
Right. So, and but I didn't necessarily, as I was watching it, envision myself as Elliot,
Right.
or
Or E.T.
but or ET for that matter. But I did relate to a kid who rides his bike through the neighborhood and who's that age
Or
and
like
who's
Goonies,
yeah,
right? Goonies
yeah,
worked. Goonies
Goonies.
worked on me.
Goonies is another kid movie with kids that I didn't say, oh God, this is a kid movie, I can't watch it
No,
anymore.
it was beautiful.
So yeah, and there were also kids in movies. I remember the kid who played in Indiana Jones, for example.
Yeah.
Standing
Whose
out
name
as
was Data, by the way.
right. So there's been good performances by kids in movies, and obviously Home Alone comes to mind as well as one of those movies that.
Or wait, no, sorry. No, that's the same kid that played Data in Goonies. I don't remember what his name was, but Indiana called him Short Stack. So he's just known it. And I can't remember the actor's name, but he's
Well, I
still
think he
acting.
actually just won the Oscar
Yeah, he's
recently,
still
if I'm not
acting.
mistaken.
It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I think he just won the Academy Award for one of the movies he just
That's
was
right.
in. Uh, but also like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone carried several movies by himself as a kid actor.
And it worked. You're
Totally,
right.
and I totally bought it. I loved it. So like I can't just knock stuff because a kid's in it. It has to be subject matter that the story in itself is interesting and compelling and complements the fact that a kid is in. Like it makes sense that this thing is happening through the kids' eyes and lens and stuff like that. So with Home Alone, that makes sense. Every kid has the Home Alone moment when your parents trust you enough to leave you in the house by yourself for a few hours. Not for the weekend, but for a few hours, right? And so you feel that Home Alone sense of, oh wow, you know, Home Alone. Um, so in that way, I can say I've watched those movies. I've liked kids in movies. I've liked the way they perform.
But
In this particular episode, that's where the but comes in there. Just like you told me, it's hard to fall in love with, hard to believe two people fall in love in a single episode, and in 30 minutes they're like want to get married. It's also hard for me to care about a character that I just met. So it's not necessarily that it's a kid, but it's also this is a brand new character, right? And her father is a brand new character. So uh emotionally, I don't even have a connection or an attachment to this person or character. That's why I said, at least with the cost of living episode with Major Roddenberry and Roshenko, at least we know Roshenko's backstory, Alexander's backstory. We've seen it before. There's some attachment there. I might not like it the best. I might not want to see it the most out of it. If you gave me, all these characters' storylines, do you want to see this, or that? It would probably be down on the bottom of the list of things I want to see. But at least I have a connection because there's Worf's character connected to it. It's the main character's kid. This is a guest star kid,
I
right?
know. And that's the thing, is that I'm pretty sure these characters were introduced for this one episode, never again. And then, but this is such a TNG thing to do, which is introduce this character, and suddenly there the dad is in main engineering with Geordi. He's talking with Picard. He's figuring out and then he wasn't there in the first 100 and something episodes. He's not there in the next 60 something episodes. But then whoever, and that happens all the time when we saw someone else's kid, maybe it was like Jeremy Astor or something, somebody else's kid, and suddenly his mom is there in main engineering hanging out with Geordi. She's like the top dog there, and we're like, wait, what? So whoever is introduced in that scene or in that season or episode is going to be one of the main characters in something. It's so strange how they would do that, or they'd be at the helm, or something like that. It's always been this strange next generation phenomenon where somebody gets introduced, suddenly they're one of the top people and they're in the scenes, and then they're gone, never seen again. And we saw it in this case.
Yeah, but like I said before, we've seen it. We saw Counselor Troy have a baby, right? Didn't she have a new baby and it grew up really fast or something like that? And but there was a connection. It's Troy, and then we saw Data have a kid.
Lol, yeah.
And that was cool because it all ended in one episode, but still, it was Data's kid. So it was like a storyline centered around a figure that we already have familiarity with.
Totally.
In this particular episode, it was just like, it was them talking about this guy who's serving in command, I guess, or working in engineering with Geordi and Data. And we never seen him before, don't know really what he does, but he's problem solving with Geordi.
Yeah,
so he's got to be
Sutter.
smart.
Yeah.
Right. And then his kid is seeking counseling, right? And I thought, oh, this maybe was a Troy episode, but it really wasn't a Troy episode. So I wasn't sure what I was watching. And, as I'm watching, I'm like, whose episode is this? Essentially, that was
exactly.
That's what I was trying to get to. Whose episode is this?
Because Clara, you might think maybe it's a Clara episode, but Troy, we see her just as much as Clara. We see Sutter just as much as Clara, basically. We almost see Isabella as an Isabella episode. No, but yeah, we kind of see a little bit of everybody. Certainly Troy was the most involved of the senior staff, then Worf a little bit. Let me ask you this though. Why could it not have been just going along with what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, why could it not have been an Alexander episode? Because then we already know Alexander. We already know Worf. We already know their relationship to Deanna Troi. There's already something built in. Why couldn't it have been? Why wasn't it? Because I don't know.
Yeah, and we've already established that Alexander's having troubles
Yep.
on the station, growing up, dealing with his dad, and so there's been issues there. And so if he had taken on this imaginary friend role, that would have made it kind of, we would have seen Troy and Worf having those parental conversations like we did in previous episodes, and maybe extending that storyline, some continuity there. It could have worked. It could have worked. I was totally cool. I would have been cool with that.
I mean,
And
at least,
and you know what? And I feel bad because I feel like I've been a little hard on these actors who are these kids in this episode. I thought the kids did good.
yeah, they were fine.
I thought they were, I thought they were good.
Better than I expected. Because again, I remember not liking this episode 20 years ago or whatever it was. And so I was like, oh God, kids. Oh, the kids can't act this and that. But they were okay. They were pretty good children actors for the early 90s. Because we all know what passed for kid acting in the 80s and 70s was like, just remember your lines, kid. Like just say the line.
Well, and then they cast it well because they got one girl who was, sweet. The Clara girl who was sweet and believable and, seemingly honest and truthful, just had a pleasant demeanor about her personality and spirit. And then they got this other girl who had the big eyes, and she looked like a creep, right? She looked like a stalker, or like she looked like the villain. What was those movies back
Single
in the day?
white female.
Yeah, like it was Basic Instinct. At that time when they came out with the Hand That Rocks the Cradle and those kind of stalkerish movies.
Oh, you know who she could be now? 30 years later, Misery. She could take the Kathy Bates role in Misery.
Yeah, she had that Misery, Hand That Rocks the Cradle, just the main kind of antagonist in those films of that kind of fabric, of that cloth. So I thought the casting was good and the performances were good. This girl was super creepy in her performance. There was a moment there when Clara said to Isabella, she said, you're mean or something because you haven't smiled since and she's like, how come you don't smile? Like, why don't you smile? And Isabella gave like the creepiest. I thought it was great acting. She's just like forcing the smile, and she did it like a touch of her own face. Like, this is what it feels like. This is
like, oh, am I doing it? Yeah, this is weird.
Yeah, this is weird. Okay.
By the way, words of wisdom: don't tell a girl to smile more. By the way, it's not a thing. She could get away with it, but yeah, I agree with you though. Like that, I took for granted back in the day, and this. Today, I was like, okay, good actors. They got some good people. So I guess my question to you is, Sirach, did you like this episode? Ooh, boy, that's a hard-hitting question.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I can't figure out how they had 5 writers on this. Like who? Like it took 5 people to figure this out. Like it didn't seem that complex that you would need a meeting of all these minds to figure out like how are we going to do this? How are we going to? This didn't seem that complex.
And I think I was going to save that for after the break, but we got a few minutes before this one. But I think that may have been what the problem was. Too many cooks, because we've seen it before where an episode has a ton of writers and it's not good. Now, we've seen it before where it had a ton of writers and it was good, like yesterday's Enterprise. But a lot of times you have 3 story by people. So maybe 2 of them had one kind of story idea and another one had a different story idea, and they used kind of both of those story ideas. And then Edith and Brannon wrote it together, and there's just so many, there's just a mishmash. Plus, this is the 22nd episode. It seems like a lot of seasons of Star Trek, different kinds of Star Trek, are kind of notorious where like episodes 21 through 24 can get a little choppy because they're out of ideas, except for the really good 1 or 2 that they're saving for the end of the season. You know what I mean? They have like 1 or 2 really good ones at the end of the season, and now they're scraping the bottom. 21 to 24 is bottom of the barrel. If you get a good one, great. But you may just be like using one because you're like, we need one. We have a deadline. Just go with it. Just do your best. Good luck. Godspeed. I think this may have been that.
Yeah. So in answer to your question, really, I did not like it.
What?
Yeah, I didn't like it. No. And there's so many reasons. One of the big reasons is the B storyline as well. And there was no saving grace in this episode. Like sometimes there's just that, okay, at least I got some comedy out of Worf, or I got Data to do something cool. Like there's always some saving grace out of an episode where you're like, wasn't that bad? Well, at least the costumes were great, or the set design was like, or the music, there's something there. Or the B storyline. The B storyline can often be the thing that you're like, hey, you know what? I wish they focused more on the B storyline than the A storyline, and that would have been good. If they focused more on this B storyline, I would have fell asleep faster. It's like they're in a nebula that's like zapping the. I didn't feel danger. I didn't feel. I just felt like the B storyline also was like a poor compliment to try to explain away some of this cross connection between this entity and all of this other stuff.
Yeah, so boy, oh boy, we could not disagree more on this. Let me tell you, we got to jump to our break. But on the other side, I'm going to give you a couple silver linings. I'm going to talk about the B plot. This is going to be Frasier and Ali in the next round. You watch. All right, everybody stick around. We've got our break. We'll be right back on the 7th Rule.